Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of your favorite series, My Favorite Things. As promised for October, I'm going to continue my theme of horror and general stuff that's appropriate for Halloween. So this week, I'll analyze the popular horror game, Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Ooh, this game has given me countless emotional breakdowns with its massive dose of psychological survival horror. And I know I'm not the only one. Some YouTubers, even the most subscribed PewDiePie, have launched their careers by soiling themselves playing this. General warning, although there's no official ESRB rating for Amnesia, there's still some pretty dark imagery that's not suitable for all ages, and the occasional crusty naked old corpse. Viewer discretion is advised. And spoiler warning for those who still want to experience it. Okay, enough PSAs, let's get started. Why is Amnesia considered one of the most horrifying video games? Is it even about something past the scares? How could this game create millionaires? And why is Amnesia: The Dark Descent one of my favorite things? Let's take a look. There are several compilations of adults screaming as they desperately run for their lives in Amnesia.
Go! Oh my god! Ah! Ah! Oh! Go eat! Go eat! Eat!
But is it really that scary? No, not at all. This game's not that bad. You know, I always cry in the corner. No, I just ran out of the room screaming because I needed the exercise. All joking aside, this is easily one of the scariest games I've ever played. And it's the good kind of scary, not just cheap jump scares or little girls walking across the screen. One of the things Amnesia does perfectly is build up the horror. It's like a nightmare slow cooker. For the first few areas, there's no threat. But we don't know that yet, so we still crouch along the floor, slowly open every door, and second guess whether or not we should turn on our lantern. Then, after the introduction levels, we still only get glimpses of the monsters, grunts to be exact. The game is divided into sections, with 4 hub areas that connect to side areas, and pure craziness between each hub. So, during the first section, we see them, but there's no interaction, just highly scripted events in which you can't get hurt. And this is probably an hour or 2 in, and still you're not getting attacked. Yeah, maybe 2 hours, depending on how much of a man-baby you are. It's only after the first section that you truly encounter your first monster, the Cairnic. The Cairnic, we're going with that. It's a small and invisible water-dwelling creature, but I'll address it a bit later. Only after you encounter the Cairnic, 2 hours in, do you finally get attacked by the grunts. And then after the second section is done in the prison areas, the brutes are hinted at, and not seen until the end of the third section. The brutes are faster than grunts, and can kill you in one hit. So we see how Amnesia isn't focused on throwing everything at you immediately. It lets the fear build. Most of the scares are only in your head, because you expect the game to throw everything your way, but it doesn't. It's patient. It waits for you to get adjusted, maybe a little brave, and then wham! There's a monster on the other side of the door you just opened. Okay, so back to the Cairnic thing that I mentioned. The 2 levels with it, after the first section, are 2 of the most intense things I've ever played, and I've played Minecraft. First of all, the presentation of the monster. You don't see it itself, but you see its splashes in the water as it sprints toward you in a flooded room, with a few unsubmerged crates as your only salvation. The first half of the first flooded level is a race against time. In one room, you have to crank open a door, and in another is the door that leads to the second half. And then you have to run through the water to get past the door before it shuts, and before you get devoured. Oh, that was bad, but the second half is far worse. You have to vulnerably wade in the water and crank open a door. The only way to survive is to distract the Cairnic with some body parts to snack on. And then, as you're slowly cranking the door open, you hear the splashes as it comes for you next. It's insane. The second level is simply a sprint to safety past several of the monsters. No crates or carcasses to help you this time. You just run. Normally, I would dock points from a game for having its best moment so early on. Remember, this is still before the first real grunt encounter. But there are plenty of other terrifying parts that rival this, and one other thing. You become hydrophobic for the rest of the game. Whenever you see a flooded area, your instinct is to instantly sprint to dry land. And the game even tortures you with the occasional splash in the water. Now, nothing scares you more than splashes. And that's the beauty of the character levels. They traumatize you to the point when literally all it needs to do is show water to make you jump. Pee suddenly isn't the only thing you fear in pools. Towards the end, you get to see the character one last time, but it's down a well and you can't interact with it. Again, the other two monsters are also terrifying and get their time to shine too. Perhaps the most terrifying level is the second prison level, the North Prison Block. Grunts wander the halls and hide in rooms for you to accidentally stumble upon. And there's no letting up. And the horrific sounds that play when you're being chased, oh my goodness. When you hear this sound, it's over. You're done. You're done. It makes the chases that much more intense. So yes, the Dark Descent is intelligently terrifying. I've spent so much of my life with this game paused as I try to build up the courage to keep going. The gameplay of Amnesia goes hand in hand with the horror. It's quite simple actually. There are no guns or anything to defend yourself, so it's that much scarier. Your only tool and ally on this quest is your lantern that lights up the darkest corners of the castle and your heart. But it also acts as a beacon for monsters. Your greatest hope of not getting brutally murdered is hiding in the darkness. Of course, having a big bright light kinda ruins that. You can also light up candles with tinder boxes scattered around the map. Tinder is a lifesaver. No, not that Tinder. This is where resource management comes in. You only have limited oil and tinder boxes, so you have to use your resources wisely. Many times you'll just have to toughen up and wander through the darkness, which is cool because we see Daniel's eyes adjust to the different amount of lighting. But besides monsters, another thing to beware of is insanity. As you witness the supernatural, look at monsters, and walk through darkness, your sanity meter drops. You begin to see the effects as you go crazy. You'll hallucinate roaches, the camera gets blurry, you hear Daniel gnashing his teeth, and there's a picture of the character Alexander that changes. If your sanity drops too low, you collapse and become an easy prey item. Why Amnesia is my favorite survival horror is because it makes you juggle between safety, sanity, and resources. You have to make choices all the time. Like, if there's a monster in the area, do you risk your sanity by hiding in the darkness, or do you take a chance staying in the light where you may be spotted? Do you use tinderboxes to permanently light up the area, eat up your oil, or go through the darkness? These are thoughts that we should be having as we try to survive and manage the different gameplay elements. Besides the horror stuff, the rest of the gameplay works sort of like Resident Evil, where you find and combine objects to solve puzzles with. There's a lot of puzzle solving, but they're simple enough that they don't outstay their welcome. I also like the physics of the game. You can do just about anything you set your mind to. You can smash and throw about anything you please, and even barricade doors when a monster's coming. Even the doors are done well. You don't hit a button to open and close them. No, you literally need to grab and drag them yourself. This makes chases much more realistic and stressful, especially when you're trying to run away and you push the door but it's a pull. Besides adding extra panic and realism, it makes Daniel more relatable because everyone's publicly embarrassed themselves by making this mistake. So, overall, what's great about Amnesia's gameplay is that it's very simple and easy to get the hang of, yet at the same time is very layered and has you constantly strategizing. Okay, so it's scary, but what is it about? The story of Amnesia revolves around an archaeologist named Daniel. He's the character you play as. There's a lot of backstory to the game that's told through Daniel's own diary entries and notes scattered around Brennenburg Castle. This is because he wakes up not remembering anything, hence the name Amnesia. But before losing his memory, Daniel leaves a note for himself. The typical stuff, like his name and, to kill a dude. Yeah, so the plot revolves around Daniel progressing through the castle in order to kill the Baron Alexander. From there, you learn more about Daniel and Alexander's backstories as you go through the game. It starts out with Daniel exploring a tomb in Algeria where he finds a mystical orb. But after it's excavated, a supernatural entity only known as the Shadow follows in pursuit of Daniel and the orb. Everyone in his path gets killed by this Shadow as he travels to learn more about the orb. Rightfully so, Daniel becomes petrified by these murders. That is until he's delivered a note from Alexander inviting him to stay at Brennenburg Castle so they can take care of the Shadow. Alexander shows Daniel the mystical power of the orb and rituals to prolong the Shadow's arrival. These rituals become more extreme as they start sacrificing humans to cast it out. Some men are simply tortured for the extraction of an important chemical in their blood called vitae, and after the torture, the survivor would be given an amnesia potion so they can re-experience the pain like it's the first time and produce more of the vitae. Alexander tried to comfort Daniel by claiming that the executions were justified as they were only killing criminals, but even this flimsy excuse began to fall apart as more people claimed their innocence. One man being sacrificed due to murder yelled out how he didn't kill anyone, that whoever he supposedly murdered ran into a burning building against the accused's wishes. A lot of this we only hear as Daniel experiences flashbacks as seeing certain areas jog his memory. In one scene towards the very end of the game, he remembers when Alexander let him do his first sacrifice. It's extremely intense and bone-chilling. The game doesn't show anything, but we do hear Daniel talking as he performs it. Again, viewer discretion is advised.
Hurry. No time to spare. You have to kill another. Alexander produces a knife. He wants me to cut the flesh. Do it. Save yourself. He is a murderer, Daniel. He is evil. A cold-blooded killer. Hurry. Alexander, you must let me be. I have to concentrate. Take the man, cut the lines, cut the flesh, watch the blood spill, let it come. Please, I didn't do anything. Take the man, cut the lines, take the man, cut the lines. Please, the man cries. Now you see.
Daniel becomes more and more accustomed to killing, to the point where it even seems like he's enjoying it. The breaking point is after he kills an innocent little girl. Daniel begins to reflect on the monster he's become and the lengths he's taken to save his own life. Drenched with guilt, he takes the amnesia potion and convinces himself to kill Alexander for what he's turned him into. So here's the game's starting point. Because Daniel doesn't remember anything, we're learning about Brennenburg Castle and the game's backstory with him. As he recalls his past, we learn more about him. Overall, I think Amnesia: The Dark Descent has a very unique, dark, and intriguing backstory that plays out like a mystery being slowly revealed. Again, your goal in the game is to kill Alexander because he convinced your character to become a murderous psychopath. So, what's this guy's deal? Why go through all the trouble? Well, Alexander is actually from another dimension from which he was banished to Earth. Apparently, this dimension is much further in technology than early 1800s Europe, as strange structures and tamed lightning are mentioned.
We have technology.
Alexander also has a firm understanding of alchemy, biology, and engineering. So, he contacts Daniel to gain possession of the orb. That and vitae were all he needed to power up a machine that would set him back to his world, where he would be reunited with his lover. He excuses all his horrendous actions and manipulation of Daniel by thinking of himself as the victim, forced to reside in a foreign world for hundreds of years. Even though he shows some remorse for Daniel, he still decides to go along with his plan to travel to his homeworld and leave Daniel to the Shadow. The Shadow, as I mentioned before, is the supernatural guardian of the orb. It has no physical form, but wherever it approaches, a chunky, gooey residue forms all over. As we progress through the game, we see the Shadow slowly take a hold of the different areas, leaving its goo and making a screeching sound. It leads to plenty of disturbing and unsettling scenes. For example, once the second section is completed, It fills a weird baby fountain with blood. Everyone in its path, even one of the monsters, will be brutally killed. So it's definitely a force to be afraid of, especially in an epic chase scene towards the end, where it just relentlessly dashes at Daniel. And this is all set up for you in the introduction, only to be revealed more and more throughout the game. When considering the different pieces to Amnesia, I think it's about the lengths that people go through to achieve their goals, and how the ends don't justify the means, especially if those means are brutally murdering innocent villagers. Daniel commits these atrocities to ward off the shadow and save himself, while Alexander does what he does to return to his homeworld. Obviously, murder is wrong, but they keep convincing themselves that they're doing the right thing, and that these small sacrifices are worth it. In both their pursuits, they go from being the victim that needs help to an inhumane monster. But Daniel's eyes get opened eventually, while Alexander never comes to terms with his wrongdoings. You can also say that out of desperation, people become willing to go to extremes. So the grunts, Karenks, and brutes aren't the real monster of Amnesia, the humans are. Now I do have a few problems with this game. My biggest complaint is a few of the scares. There's this one scare that the game performs multiple times that just doesn't work that well. It goes like this. Say you go into a room and pick up an item or complete a task. Once that's done, a monster will spawn right outside the door, forcing you to hide. The problem here is that it's not threatening. You have plenty of time to hide yourself because the monster needs to break down the door. Sometimes it doesn't even do that unless you make a lot of noise. So really the only way to die in these situations is to act completely idiotic. So there really isn't much of a threat here. My other complaint is that a few times throughout the game, the voice acting isn't that great. Don't get me wrong, it's not Resident Evil bad.
What is it?
It's a weapon. It's really powerful, especially against living things. Better take it with you.
But how about you, Barry?
I have this.
Thank you. I'll take this then.
But it's noticeable sometimes. I went through this game again for you guys. I went through this again. Amnesia is probably the best horror game I've ever played. The horror itself is amazing. The build-up is slow and well-paced. The scares are mostly psychological. There are no cheap jump scares or anything like that. The gameplay is simple and easy to grasp, yet well layered. The music and sound designs are great and add a lot to the game. Daniel is instantly an interesting protagonist, and the game's backstory is gruesome and intriguing. Amnesia has crafted an unforgettable story, along with many amazing scares, and that is why Amnesia: The Dark Descent is one of my favorite things. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. See you guys next week.